And for that we are going to use a terrain object. So this will look for a height field volume. And let's go back up and let's go all the way to our height field terrain. And over here for our HF volume, this is where our terrain was still in the form of a volume. So I can check this over here. We can see that we have two fields for height and mask. We are only interested in the height. And if I were to grab this, so Control C, and if I were to import this in our .NET, let's select our terrain object and place this as a subpath, so our height field volume, and let's preview this. This will work as it is, but the problem here is that this center part in the middle that we split to create our fracture geometry is going to be overlaid on top of each other. So we can see here that this part in the middle, we already have it covered by our packed pieces over here and also our collision. So we need to somehow edit this volume in order to avoid this center part over here. So let's go back up a level and let's see how we can edit this terrain a bit. From our terrain we can create a mask based on an object, and we can use our original tube that we created to cut out the initial part of our terrain. So over here for the geo setup, we can see that we have this tube object, and I will actually drop down a null from here and I will rename this to tube, and I will Control C this guy and just object merge it over here to the right of my terrain. So object merge this tube. So from my HF volume, let's maybe actually just grab all of these and create some room over here. So here we have the volume and my tube. Let's make some room, and I want to drop from my HF volume a height field mask by object and plug the tube into the second input of this node. So now we have created a mask with our original tube that was used to cut up the geometry. So from this node I can drop down a height field clip and plug this output into the second input as well. So let's use the mask that we created. And now I can adjust this max clip value, and I'll just drag this down until we sort of start to clip inside the terrain. So I'll just make sure that we have enough room, that our geometry base and our surface area do not intersect with this height field volume. And this will be maybe easier if I preview this GeoInit node over here. So this is the part that this is the actual geometry surface that we cut out. And we can see that we have enough room over here. And maybe also let's go back here, and I want to spread this hole a little bit. So I want to separate it a little bit from the surface geometry. So with this tube over here, I can simply drop down a peak, and I will just sort of expand this tube a little bit. So I will just increase this value of the peak. Maybe let's set the distance to 0.5. Let's go back here. Okay, so we can see that with or without the peak, how this will work. And for the collision, we don't really need to work with such a high count of voxels, and I can also further optimize this terrain if I drop down a height field resample node, and I will scale the resolution by 0.5. So this will split the resolution of this volume in half. And from here I will drop down a null, and I will rename this to HF collide collision. And I will grab this node, Control C, and let's now place this in our .NET. So for the terrain object, the subpath should point to this HF collision that we created. Okay, let's now drop down a merge and merge this in. And now we should have all of our collision. And I can preview the output. So maybe there's actually a little bit too much of a gap between the surface geometry and this volume collision geometry. Let's maybe go back up, and actually I'll just get rid of this peak node over here. So I'll just get rid of this, and there should still be quite a significant distance between the pieces now. So we really didn't need that peak node in the end. And now we will see this terrain object more in action when we make our pieces fly, so it has something to collide against. But for now this should be fine and we can move forward.